Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. We are in a new month, so we got a new topic. So I'm delighted to welcome Nick and Jason. Hi, guys.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, how you doing?
I'll introduce you properly in a second, and just whilst everyone is beginning to log in and everything. And here's this month's schedule. This is the page that we usually give out. This is the link to all the registration pages for the webinars over the last few months. This went up in April, so we've been doing them for many months now. So you can scroll down past all the months to October, and this is the theme for this month. We're going to be going through tricks for editors, how to do amazing stuff on the timeline without looking like it spent time to do it, essentially. That's the definition of editing, I think. But I'm delighted to welcome two of my esteemed peers, Jason Hare, who is a tremendously well-experienced editor and designer and workflow consultant and all the other things that you do, Jason. Jason works on many different sports tournaments and is used to getting things out on the timeline in next to no time. I think the first tournament we worked on was in Brazil back about 6 or so years ago, wasn't it? When the World Cup, when they first did the World Cup in Premiere.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the Premiere that they're effectively beta testing that became 8.1, I think. But that seems such a long time ago. And Jason's got some fantastically useful experience both in Avid and in Premiere about fixing things really quickly. So I've learned a huge amount from him over the years. So welcome, thanks for joining us, Jason, for this month.
No problem.
And also we have Nick back. You'll remember Nick from our previous sessions. I'm trying to think of a topic that you can't master, Nick, because you're a master trainer for a whole range of different software applications, aren't you?
Yes, yes, I am. I would say a Swiss Army knife when it comes to some post-production editing software. That's for sure.
Master of all, expert of all. There we go. And here we go. So thank you to people who've saying that the picture looks good, reminding me that I need to do my job and say, hi, can you see us and hear us? Thank you. Thank you, as usual, Kent, for doing that. Hi to Alberto from Portugal, and hi, everyone, all the usuals. Hi, Rob, how you on? Glad the audio is working for you, Vera. Just a quick little message. Yes, we're recording this session, and here are the sets of the recording. They're on the usual YouTube channel. In fact, both Jason and Nick have done a whole variety of these techniques, or rather other techniques for us. You probably remember Jason's amazing sessions on expressions, and here they are doing expressions and automating MoGraph inside After Effects. But what you might not know on this list of things is that we've got a whole range of different playlists as well. So if you go run through the playlists on here, then you can find the different topics set up and listed in a slightly different way. So here we go. If I just run down to where am I looking? And here, customize channel. If I go to playlists here we go. And I can just look at where are my playlists. There's a whole range. We've set them out in different topics. So all these same videos. So if you wanted to, you can go to the channel, look at playlists just for color correction, some of which we're doing today, or the whole list of all the demystifying post-production webinars we've done. And just before I hand over to the guys, just want to mention this. Nick's done this amazing series of videos on Red Giant Universe. And we'll be covering Universe over the next few weeks and looking at things that you can do on the timeline inside Premiere and Avid. And we might even jump into Final Cut and Resolve at some point, just to show you how you can then do these tricks that typically mean that you have to open the graphics toolbox, if you like. But Nick, you've got something to share about this particular course that you've just released 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, it's a Red Giant Universe it covers what you can do with it inside of Premiere Pro. There's a little bit of coverage inside of Avid Media Composer 2 for a few of the movies, and then some specifically related towards After Effects in the next chapter. with a big feature on HUD components, if that might be a beneficial part of your workflow for creating future user interfaces. And at the end today, or if not at the end, when you guys receive an email with the web recording, I'll send you a link that gives you a 30-day free trial to LinkedIn Learning, and you can check out the course and let me know what you think.
So you can use or look at everything for 30 days without payment, and download all the project files and everything like that?
No payment. I believe that they do take a credit card, and that you'll probably do want to watch that date if that's something that you don't want to subscribe to. But besides that, the course is free and all the content is free.
Pretty sweet. All right, thank you for that, Nick.
No
and what, you'll give that link at the end of the session today, will you?
I will, yes. I will give the link at the end of the session.
Oh, too busy to give the link out now.
Yeah, exactly. Just
right.
Gotta stay focused.
Excellent. Okay, well, stay tuned for that at the end. Oh, and yes, just one other quick thing, just before I hand over to Nick. We've got, just wanted to ask you that what do you use as an editing software? Because it just helps us form where we go over the next number of weeks and so on. So, and also today. So if you've got a few moments, please just click on which particular NLE you use. And it might, if it's all of them or some of them or two together, maybe you use Avid and Premiere together, please just click a mixture of the above, but just to be a useful thing just to find out. And so let's just close up the poll here. Got a few people clicking on it. Here we go. And share those results. And I'm not entirely surprised that Premiere has got such a high score amongst them all, but it's so that's useful to know. Thank you, we appreciate that. But it's also something that even though we've got a mixture, say 10% roughly for Final Cut Resolve and a mixture of the above, and a few Avid users, often we find that, especially if you're a freelance editor, you have to jump in and use the one that you've got, or the one that's being provided for you. So we've got some techniques that you can switch from multiple hosts, and you can use the same techniques on all of them. Cool, so I'm going to switch over to you, Nick. There we go. So make you a presenter.
Okay. And I want to show my screen. I just want to make sure, can everyone see my interface? I know that I'm in the 5% choice from what I saw of the poll, but a lot of the stuff that I'll be showing here will be applicable in Premiere Pro, and I'm actually going to be sharing a preset with Jason momentarily where you have a project in Premiere Pro, if I'm correct, yes?
Yep.
Awesome.
Fantastic. I think we're just going to turn our webcams off, Nick, to manage the bandwidth.
Sure, yes, I will.
Makes the image a little larger in the screen. So
there we go. I am
brilliant. Perfect.
I hopefully my screen is bigger now. Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here in Avid Media Composer, and my part was going to talk about some things inside of Magic Bullet Looks, which I think is a fantastic tool in any nonlinear editor, because number one, you can share a preset with someone cross-platform. So almost in any of those applications that was just mentioned, not to mention with a motion graphic designer. And beyond your NLE, there are some things in the color correction tools of Magic Bullet Looks that go beyond, you know, your classic color correction tools. So I hope to demystify some of those, and then Jason will build on some of the workflows that you use to save time in color correction, building some complex color correction for video, and also doing it in a efficient manner. So to apply looks inside of Avid Media Composer, I'm just going to head over to my effects workspace. And I'm already on the Magic Bullet suite, where I'll just grab this effect and drop it onto a clip. And let me just click on the effect mode button so that we can see it. This is your first time looking at looks. It's very simple compared to other color correction tools, because we actually have to hop onto this page in order to perform all of our color correction, which allows for some acceleration in terms of the processing that goes on when building your look. So just notice what frame I'm on inside of Avid Media Composer. Again, I'll just go to my effects mode and click on Edit Look. There's some really handy tricks if you're coming here the first time that I recommend, and that's just to use some shortcuts. So if you're looking to just add a quick look, L is going to bring up your looks. Then we have S for your scopes. We also have T for your tools, which we'll discuss in a bit as well. One of my favorite parts about this, all of these categories of looks, is, this is me personally, is rather than have a look to start with, sometimes I just want to have a bunch of tools to use right away. And I want to draw your attention to two categories. One is grading setups. And what this does is if I hover over a grading power suite and then just give this a click, if you look at my toolbar below, I have now a bunch of tools that I can start using to perform some color correction, but it hasn't made any adjustments to my image. So it's really just adding multiple tools that I can start to make changes to here in the controls panel here on the upper right-hand side. So I think this is just a fantastic way to start if you're looking to do some color grading without starting with a pre-designed look. I'd also want to mention that another thing I like to do is explore looks and mix some together. So this is what this involves. I'm going to head to the indie category. And you may notice here that I'm going to select this powder keg look. In fact, let's make it the loose leaf. So I'll give that a click. And now I have a series of tools on the toolbar. And going through here, I might not want to have an influence of the exposure tool. So what I'm going to do is a few things. I'm going to decide the tools that I want to keep for the shot. One is going to be the diffusion. So I'm going to right click it and do this thing called pinning. And on the upper left-hand corner of this tool, you'll notice that this is now pinned to the toolbar. I'll do the same thing for the film print, the colorista look, and the exposure. While the shadows and the lens vignette themselves, in a second, are not pinned. What this allows for is if I go, let's say again, to a grading setup category, and then choose a simple video grade, notice that I now have these tools which I can influence in various areas, specifically post, but my pinned tools remain here. And I find this to be one of the handiest things to either add on to a built look or mix and match various looks together to come up with your own. And Jason, in a conversation recently, I remember that you mentioning that one thing that you strive to do for the content that you create is come up with your own looks. So I'm really curious your take on, in using Colorista itself, do you mix and, let's say, start with a base look, remove some, and then add to it? Or are you someone who just likes to start from scratch?
Generally, well, if I'm going for a look rather than a correction, I will always use the presets as you started, and I'll find something that closely sort of resembles where I want to start. And then I'll go and tweak the tools and add tools and take away tools as I need to.
Gotcha.
Different if I'm correcting, I will actually start from scratch, and most of my corrections tend to be quite simple.
Cool. So that's great. So I always love to start from a look too, and then tweak or go into that look and use some of these techniques of pinning to keep the various tools that I really like to bring out the shot or the effect. And in this instance, I think it'll be good if I reset my toolbar. In fact, I have to unpin my selected tools here to also remove them and then just reset that to scratch. So I'm going to build a look here inside of, I am in Media Composer, and then I'm going to share it with Jason, who's inside of Premiere Pro. And I mean, this could be used for a number of things, but the big benefit is that because this is cross-platform, you know, no matter who you're working with, someone in Premiere Pro, Resolve, Final Cut Pro 10, you can go above the restrictions that are set from an NLE's XML and then use this look, sending it to them as long as it's saved in the correct place on your computer. So I'll create a stylistic look because one of the other benefits that I like about looks is that there are these stylistic effects that go beyond your NLE. So I'll start here with the toolbar, and I'm actually going to go to the post category. Let's say I'm doing this accidentally, or what I'd like to do is actually make some changes specifically to the subject and the look of this. But I want this particular effect to be processed at the beginning of the tool chain. Accidentally, I select the post category here. And if I double click Colorista, of course, that gets added into this category. Now, Colorista can be added in multiple parts of the tool chain. And if we take a look here in the subject area, there is a Colorista effect. If you tried to move this, you'll notice here that we can move that down into the tool chain into the specific category if we need to. In certain cases, you could also take effects. And remind me, Simon, is it the command key where you can drag an effect where it's not in a specific category into another?
Yes, it's the secret keyboard shortcut that we don't tell anyone, and that's not listed inside the manual, but it's Command on the Mac and Control on the PC. It just means you can reorder
I told
things.
someone, I'm really sorry about that. Uh-oh.
You have to untell them now.
So here with the Colorista effect, I'm going to go for a desaturated look here. And most of these tools this is going to be the start of the look, but the rest of the tools I'm going to use, I think, are very unique to Magic Bullet looks. And I haven't seen as tools that are built into the color correction editor. So let's do a few things. And while I make these changes, I'm going to take a look at my scopes as well. So I'll press L here to close my looks and S to bring up my scopes. If you didn't know this, here are your scopes inside of Magic Bullet looks. And if you ever need to, you can always take one of these scopes and change the order of it by simply drag and dropping depending on your order of preference. So there's my hue and saturation now at the top, although I really do want the RGB parade. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to just increase the contrast on the shot. So I'm going to drag down the shadow detail here. Then I'm going to start to increase the midtones or exposure, paying attention to the reds here in my RGB parade. And I always use scopes in color correction, more for a sanity check than anything else. So it's really nice to have these tools here inside of Magic Bullet looks to not only create great and fresh looks, but also to make sure that you are within a legal range and that what you're looking at is, in fact, this is just, if you're looking at an image for so long, you may be influenced by that color. And this is that sanity check to make sure that everything is okay.
It's probably worth also noting here, Nick, that just in case, if you ever go over that 1.0 digital, like I think your reds are slightly over there.
Yeah.
In fact, would you mind just like knocking up the highlights so it's visibly over? And then just adding another tool, another Colorista tool to the tool chain. I just wanted to demonstrate how the tool chain works inside the looks, which if you just another Colorista wheel or tool.
Sure.
Because I just wanted to show, if you then go on that second instance of it and then bring down the highlights, then just like drag there we go. So anything that you do in the tool chain inside Magic Bullet looks doesn't clip at 100%. So if you go over and then you realize you want to get some detail back, you still get all that detail, because the way Looks processes is it combines all the tools together and then just gives one color correction instruction to the host software. And this is why Premiere, or rather Looks in Premiere supports the Mercury playback engine, both in After Effects and Premiere actually, to give you real-time playback, because it's running off the GPU, and also gives you GPU playback inside things like Avid, so that you can then do lots of messing about and get really bright highlights and then sort of like tie them down inside Look. So don't worry if you're clipping inside one particular tool, you can actually adjust for that inside the tool chain.
Cool. So yeah, I'll keep these two tools on the tool chain in this. Actually, I got to remove this and I'll go back to my original color Grista tool and then just bring down the highlights on that. But knowing that if I push something too far, like you said, Simon, I could always go back with another tool and bring back that detail. For this stylistic look, I'm going to just preserve the majority of the yellow in this lady's dress while desaturating everything else in the shot. And in Colorista, we can use our hue, saturation, and lightness tools. Now, there are a number of hue, saturation, and lightness tools specifically inside of Premiere Pro or Avid Media Composer that you can also use. So I would say that this is going to depend on, when making these changes, your specific needs in terms of color correction. But the fact that it's in this GPU accelerated system where I can use other stylistic tools, which I'm about to add, can be a really handy in this process. Another thing is, while I'm adjusting this, it should be mentioned that if I double click one of these tools, it resets it back to square one. So this is a rather fast look where I've kept the saturation in the yellows and a bit in the orange and brought it closer together to develop a base look. And I want to add on top of this. So in this case, I'm going to go to the matte category and just show one tool that I think is very unique to Colorista. And that is, sorry, to Magic Bullet Looks. And that is the diffusion effect here, where we can add a little bit of glow to a specific region of our image. In this case, it's much too strong, but I can dial down that amount to, let's say, a value of 20, and then also increase the glow to have some diffused light in my shot without necessarily adding additional effects in your post-production editor. And while I'm at here in the matte, I'm actually going to also, I'll leave that at that effect in this particular case. I'm now going to head to the lens category and add two effects. So one is a lens vignette. And I do love these tools specifically for your on-screen controls that you can use. I want to keep in mind that I'm on one still, so I want to be very wary of where I add this vignette. But adding this and then followed by, let's say, another effect. In this case, I'll add a haze flare over top. In this case, this specific effect draws a lot of parallels, if I bring up the exposure, to almost like a light leak over the shot. And while it's not animated, is a very stylistic effect that you wouldn't necessarily get with your color correction tools specifically. So I really find that this is nice if you're kind of creating a stylistic look. You can do your base grade and then start to add some stylistic effects over top. And then speaking about this, we can always, of course, manipulate the order that these things are arranged. So let me increase the amount here of the vignette, but then also show that if I wanted the haze to be affected before the vignette, I can easily switch these around in this specific category. In fact, looking at the haze flare.
That's an important tip, actually, Nick, because that makes a difference between whether or not you're just darkening the haze or whether you're actually adding yellow after the vignette's been added. So the ability to swap those around and just change their order, I think, is quite an interesting thing to just be usually doing as part of your practice, and also tied in with that tip that you showed us a bit earlier about pinning those tools. I often see people using looks and just really going from one preset to the other and resetting their entire tool chain. So if you did that here and then pin some of your tools, I think, and then you experimented with other presets, I think that's going to be a really fast way to get things that you haven't really seen before in terms of looks and treatments. Yes. Not that it's always about doing something that you haven't seen, except it sometimes is.
And some of these are effects, just to mention, Simon, are a little bit overdone, but more to sort of make sure that it translates through the World Wide Web here. And another thing I think that is awesome about this process is, again, we wouldn't be able to necessarily find that haze effect in a color corrector. And the other thing that I just love is a lot of times your color correction process involves potentially getting rid of noise in a shot, and then adding noise back in to unify everything with a specific type of grain. And I love the fact that inside looks, you've got the renoiser effect, where in this instance, I'm going to save a preset. It's going to be quite obvious. So let's go with a 16 millimeter. Let's make that more obvious. I'm going to go Super 8. And you guys can see the grain that's been produced in this preset. If you're going for something more modern,
is the same. Oh, sorry, Nick, I was
no,
just going to point out that this is the same renoiser that is part of the standalone tool that actually is doing intelligent grain. So it's breaking the image apart, then creating this texture, projecting the image onto that textured grain, and then copying it all back in again. So we've found that you get really realistic grain from that, but it's within side looks as well. So it's got the same controls and the same presets.
Yes, and I think it also brings up a great point here about that Jason actually was mentioning this the other day. Not only do you have look presets, but you have, in some of these tools, control presets for a specific tool. And if you find yourself using, let's say, a specific type of vignette for a program or a series that you're working on, keep in mind that you can save your own to a tool, which is different than saving an overall look. And I think a combination of both of these is really what's going to save you time in the color correction process, especially if color correction isn't your main job and you're also responsible for video editing, which I know a lot of people are in modern day workflows. You know, color correction is now this added thing that is expected of you as a video editor on faster projects in many cases. So now that I've kind of developed this look live, I want to share it with Jason. And there's a few ways to do this, but I want to go into my look section just so that we can see it. And to save the overall combination of tools versus the single tool, as a look, we click on the Save button on the bottom left of the interface. I've already created a look folder called For Webinar. And I'll call this My Look so that we can see it. And then press the Save button. If I take a look under where it says Custom Looks, here's my new For Webinar folder. I actually made this a variation of this look earlier, which you can see. But the magic of this is the file that I can now share with Jason, who's in a completely different NLE. And in fact, if I'm just going to check off of here and show that on my Finder, I've actually saved this location. So this happens to be in your user library on a Mac in a folder called Looks Builder. And if I get a bit further, I'm just trying to show the actual file path here. But inside your user under Red Giant, this is where you'll find your look file. I'll make sure to leave a note, or Simon will have this in the notes of exactly where that's located. And I can copy this to my desktop now and share this to, to Jason through either email or even through a text message. And I've already sent him a version of this file.
I've just added it to the chat panel, Nick. So that link for both Mac and PC is just in the chat, and we'll add it to the notes as well.
Awesome. And I just love this part of the process. Like, no matter what video editor you're working in, as long as it supports looks, you can share this look and have someone take over and have either a reference or apply that in several different ways in their NLE of choice to continue the workflow. And to which, Jason, I'm going to hand this over to you in Premiere Pro.
Cool.
So I'm now going to make you, there's your name. Awesome. Perfect. Presenter.
Let's see. So hopefully you can now see my screen.
I can.
Cool. So
yep, we can.
Picking up from where Nick left off, you can see I've got the same location on my computer. I'm using a MacBook Pro, and it follows pretty much the same path, Looks Builder, and you can see there's the file that Nick sent me earlier, which is pretty much the same as what he just built. And And that way, one other thing is, as well as any editing device, it can also work across Mac and PC. So it doesn't matter if Nick had made it on a PC and I'm on a Mac, it still works perfectly well. So they're shareable across all apps on all systems. So now I'm in Premiere, and you see I've got the same shot that Nick was dealing with. So if I apply looks to that shot, the nice thing here is once it's in that folder, as we just go back here again. So once it's in this location, it'll automatically appear in my custom folder when I'm in looks. So if I go to the looks tool, you'll see I'm in Premiere, but it's exactly the same as Nick just showed in Avid. Hit the edit look button and it'll open the separate window. And the same again. So we're on custom already, and you can see here's the look Nick sent me. So instantly I can apply that. And I've got the same look. So it's very easy to share a look across systems, which is a very powerful part of Magic Bullet. Another nice thing about this is, as Nick was saying, with saving the presets, if I particularly like the way Nick set something up, like say, for example, that haze flare, what he was saying is I could just save that as a preset and call that Nick's haze. And that way, any future projects, I can just steal that idea, and you can see it now appears in my list along with my other presets. So that's a good way to nick elements of someone else's design or color style. A few other cool things within the Magic Bullet Looks window. There's this section up the top that you can bring down a reference library. This is brilliant if you want to compare and try and sort of mimic a grade that you've seen on a film you like or something else. And you can save images. So I can save this image by hitting the camera button, and you'll see it'll add this image to my library here twice because I pressed it twice. And then I can click on an image, and you can see here I've got a scroll, which, for example, if I were trying to match this, you can see the skin tones are a bit blue here and they're orange here. You can play with different, whether it's horizontal and vertical. Nope. But that's a great way to reference an image, more for a visual reference. I noticed someone earlier who was that Jay asked if we have our own LUTs. I personally don't use LUTs ever. I tend to do everything manually, using mostly curves and hue and colorista and just whatever tools I feel the need to use. But I think similar to what Nick was saying, my workflow is I'll always come into the predefined looks because someone's already done a load of work setting up a load of looks. If we close that back, the nice thing is when you sort of hover over any, you get an instant preview of what it's going to look like. So I would normally sort of pick one I like, and then you can take it from there and start playing with the separate tools. You can turn on and off each tool to see what impact it's having. So you can see obviously the vignette there, which is a good way to sort of narrow down what each tool's doing. And likewise, you can turn off the whole lot to see the original shot to see as a comparison. You can also wind down the strength, which is another trick I'll quite often do. I might use something quite severe, like let's go with that. But then I'll actually wind down the strength a bit. And the strength fader is also found in the tool. So if we come out of here, you'll see that's on 81.2, and it's taken that number through to here. So it's a way of sort of easing off the effect. So that's a cool trick that you can make something quite harsh within looks, but then lessen it when you bring it in here.
I think that's a key point. The amount of times that I've spent watching telly and gone, well, that's the blockbuster look, or that's the blockbuster warm look. That is, it's very tempting to put something on at 100% and just to render it out and get on with your next job. But I think that tip you just showed, Jason, that would absolutely key to be able to just like take something and just like slightly reduce its strength, so you got the underlying image coming through as well.
Yeah, you can also do some cool things where if you add lens distortion, you can start getting some wacky things. You can see that's distorted the image. And by winding down the strength, you end up with a nice sort of blend of the two images, which is another trick that you can do. It sort of adds another dimension to elements once this is updated. So you'll see like that's a bit ugly, but something I just played with instantly. So it's another cool way of controlling the strength, and obviously the strength is also keyframeable, so you can actually animate the strength to mix it on and off. A few other tricks. One of the things, one thing from my opinion is correction and looks or grading are quite a different thing. A good example of correcting are things like this is an example of something I've worked on where this is an interview that was shot with two cameras, and quite often there's no time to shoot set them up properly. So you'll notice this looks almost flat, and this one's a lot more severe. So normally I would correct the two shots first. I might just step into Avid quickly to show you, which is a similar idea, but and you see the same shot, and I could bring it into Avid just the same. I tend to do a trick, especially in Avid, where I tend to build a look. It's always confusing jumping between a Premiere and Avid keyboard, as I use the original keys. I don't change my keyboard shortcuts from one to the other. I'll tend to apply the look within Avid on another layer, because that's my grade and that's the style I want. And then within each picture, I'll actually correct that individually. My shortcuts aren't working. So I would actually color grade the shot underneath. Here we go into here. So I would use curves, bring down the saturation, sort of match the shots that way. The nice thing is this gives you the similar reference idea, but the point here is I've created the look using Magic Bullet looks, and then I'm sort of quickly correcting the shots underneath the look, if you like, which then balances them out. So you can see quite quickly they're sort of already matching. I won't dwell and sit here and play with the individual controls, but you can see basically by correcting the shot under the look. So I've done a correction and then a grade on top. There's two separate steps.
I think that's a really important thing, because quite often you're dealing, especially in sport, where you're working with archive footage, you'll have something which is a completely different contrast. And the temptation is to slap a look on the top on an effects layer and then to run it out. But doing that little tweak, then it's going to make those shots kind of be more looking like each other, or there's not going to be an extreme change between them.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, looks is strong because it gives you an incredible range of tools to create a really nice look. But then you don't want to have to, like, especially working in sport where it's fast turnaround, you can see how different these shots are. If I'm going to apply looks to each shot, as I've done here, to have to go in, like I could go in here, and you can see I've already pulled these shots in. But if I save that, get rid of the tools, and save that as a still, so we've got that, and then you'd have to come out, go to the other shot, step into that. So rather than using looks for color correcting, I tend to use looks more for the grade, like to come up with a stylized look and then correct them underneath. Another trick, obviously, because a lot of the stuff I work in, you're working with time constraints. So quite often, if you're shooting like these guys are big Champions League soccer players or football players, if you're UK based, and we'll be lucky to get 10 minutes with them. So you don't really have time to adjust too many things. You need to sort of set it up, and when they come in, you just need to concentrate on getting the question. So quite often you do get mismatched cameras. So there's a lot of time correcting. Where possible, I always suggest using a clapper board, which where it looks cool, you can see here. This is a similar situation when we film the green screens of players. Obviously it's set up on a green screen. In this case, it's 4K shot in profile, so we maximize the screen space. But by using this clapper board, which this is an official, we bought this from like a TV supply shop, not only does it look cool and we can get him to say his name and clown about with the clapper board, but I've got an actual white color reference. So when you're correcting white balances, you can always tap on the white and you know that's pure white, pure black on either end, and white and the mid gray. So it's a perfect way to match color. This again is quite important because we'll shoot each player of a team pretty much like a factory. They'll come in like a conveyor belt. They come in one by one, do their piece and then walk off. And then obviously the cameraman's trying to expose for them correctly, which changes the green screen. But then sometimes you might be asked to build a composite of 10 different players. And of course they could vary from really pale white skin to really dark black skin. And then obviously if a cameraman's exposed, you're changing the blacks and whites in camera. So by having this as a reference, you can always put the colors back. So the comparison between players stays accurate. Like a black guy will stay black and a white guy will stay white, and the right difference between them, which is obviously something to honor people's true skin tones. I'm going to jump into Colorista for a few other tricks. Colorista, while there's a smaller version within looks, obviously part of the Magic Bullet look suite comes with all these other tools, Mojo and Renoiser and Denoiser. But Colorista I find particularly powerful, especially for people who aren't very good with color correcting or you want to learn about it. And one of my favorite features, this is using Colorista, and it has a thing called guided color correction. But actually, before I go there, one of the things when you're in Premiere, and as the survey says, most of you are in Premiere, this is quite a useful thing. In Windows extensions, you have a colorista tab. And when I click on that, it opens a sort of more flexible grading panel that you can see a lot of the controls simultaneously. Obviously, I'm on a single screen, but you can see there's everything sort of at my fingertips. So it's a lot closer than having to scroll up and down a little window. But one of the really cool things is it has this guided color correction. This is quite nice because this is the process I was taught to color grade, and it's part of the reason I don't use LUTs, because I like to control everything myself. You can see this is another one of these chroma keyed football players. So we'll use guided color correction. So we can just click this guided color correction button and it'll open up a new window, and it sort of explains step by step of what we're going to do. And it's quite brilliant. The first step is it's asking you what color space. So automatically you can see the impact it's having here: flat standard video, flat video, log, which this is obviously log, or I don't know if you're not sure. And then you can go from there. But if we choose log, which looks like a good representation, and now you can start playing bit by bit. So black levels, you can see we've got a simple slider. We can change the black levels, and you can see on the right-hand image over here, you can see where the black is clipping, which means we're losing detail in those areas. So my personal way would be to get the black as low as you possibly can without any clipping. So somewhere like there. You can see the recommendation is a line here, which I've gone lower than that, but that's because I want the blacks to be close to true black. You could argue, looking at the image, that that's probably a bit too black because there isn't actually black in that. So maybe we should just tweak that back up a little bit. And then we skip to the next step and we do the same thing with white levels. So you can see when we get to this sort of point, you've lost all the definition in the white, which is not something you normally want. So you want the white as you can get without it going over. Midtones is, as it says, you can see on the scale here, you can slide the midtones down so it sort of darkens the mid-range. So technically you're not really changing the black or the white, but you're sort of stretching the middle section within that. So depending what your purpose is, I think something like that looks quite nice. The other thing is with grading especially, but also correction, is there's a level of subjectiveness to it. Obviously, you don't want someone to look green. Skin tones is the most important thing with any color correction, because if a person looks green, it'll look wrong. If you have a person walk past a blue tree, odds are you probably won't even spot the tree's blue because their skin tones are right, and humans are attuned to sort of detect correct skin tones, and that's what will stand out. So there's not, obviously if you've got a blue face, that's probably wrong unless that's a deliberate look, but it's something to keep in mind that you can't really grade wrong. I see a lot of grades that I personally think are quite ugly, but it's subjective. It doesn't mean it's wrong. So contrast, obviously how spread the color is using all the luminances across the range. We can play with that. And then saturation, it always defaults to 0 for some reason, but you can wind that up, and you can see on the vector scope, we can push it to the point where it's almost electric colored, which is too much. I have
a technical reason why it's at 0, if you're interested.
Yeah, go on.
It's because of the trick to the eye. If you're looking at the same camera all the time, then you can kind of think that that saturation that's coming off the camera is the one that is the true one, and so your eyes can easily get kind of as a tricked, if you like. So it's at 0, so you can bring it up, and then it's easier to see from a black and white image where the color would have been too far if you just like took it off the camera. But it's an old grading trick where you used to be able to like switch the monitor to black and white and then switch it back to color, and then you'd see the huge difference between the two. Kind of echoes back to that reason.
Okay, that's cool. Well, that's actually a valid point as well. That one thing I would say, a lot of people, when you're grading, it's important to understand that for those who understand how a white balance works on a camera, that human eyes work the same way. And it's really important that the lighting environment you're in is good for grading, and preferably the wall behind the monitor should be white or mid-gray. There shouldn't be colored walls behind the monitor, and the lighting environment you're in should be pure white, or as much as possible. The reason is if you're using sort of orangey yellow lights, you'll tend to color correct all your whites to look blue. And that has actually happened to me before. I did an exercise video where everyone was sort of doing exercise against a white cyclorama. I sat there happily grading away all morning, went outside and got some fresh air at lunch, came back and realized that everything was blue because my eyes had corrected the yellow room to make that look white. So then my color correcting was sort of offset by the color. So it's quite an important factor to think about your room. And if you Google it, there's all kinds of setups. You can even buy special paint for your walls if you want to get that obsessive about it. Obviously, it's also useful.
18% grey.
Yeah, it's also useful if your monitor is calibrated. I use a little spider thing that you attach to it, and it runs through a cycle of colors and gets your monitor close to a better color scheme to make sure, especially if you're using an Apple MacBook, you'll find Apples are set up so they look really glamorous in a shop, but it's not actually great for color grading.
That's true. I tend to switch off night shift when I'm grading stuff, because I did exactly the same trick as you did, and then realized that it would just gone to dusk and my screen was gradually going yellow, and so I was going against that particular grade.
Jason,
Yes.
I had a question, because color correction is part of the post-production work you do, because you're editing a piece, you're adding motion graphics, if I'm correct as well. How do you balance how much time you spend on color correction in a project? And just out of curiosity, when you have really aggressive deadlines?
It's tricky. I guess it's like the whole everything I do, because the same with sound, like how much time do you put into the sound mix and the graphic design, and a lot of that sort of comes down to the distribution of the day and your deadline. It'll also depend on the type of project you're on. Quite often I'll grade shots as they're going. I use tricks when I'm working on football, for example. Like quite a lot of the football I edit, you'll have the TX, like the version that was sent out to the world for the game, and then we might have extra cameramen there. So I will color each type of clip so I can quickly identify in my edit what clip is what type of format, because then you'll find if I want to give the TX a certain look, all of those clips will stand out as a particular color. So it's a quick way to apply. But how much time, it kind of depends. Like one of the problems I have finding with working with producer-led sessions is you find the producer will want to spend the entire edit getting their story right, and they forget that color work can take some time. So a lot of the time it sort of comes down to how much time they allow. So it's tricky. The more time, the better. I've colored a few documentaries and things like that where you're able to spend a couple of days. And I used to work on reality television where I'd color episodes, and you'd basically get 2 days to color a 1 hour episode, like programs like The Voice. So that's quite different to sports stuff where you might have a day to cut a 4-minute feature, which includes the full sound work and full grade. So a lot of, I think, especially broadcast television, is about doing what you can in the time permitted. So I'll just jump back into this guided color correction just to finish off. The next step we have is color balance. You'll see you've got a neutral gray here. So this is useful if I had the clapperboard. I could have picked the gray off the clapperboard, which will set the tint and temperature right. But this looks quite good because this was professionally filmed. The key to this is, so now you see a before and after, which that looks quite good. When you finish it, the nice thing is it actually brings all those settings you can see they've adjusted within Colorista, so that we can then go on and tweak it further and save our settings. So guided color correction is quite nice, because not only does it sort of take you through step by step, but it teaches you the process of start by adjusting your blacks, then your whites, then your color, and a logical sort of process. Another quick couple of tricks I'll show you. One of the things I like about Colorista is it has a built-in keying system where, in this particular example, if I go back here and turn this off, in this case, I just wanted to turn off, Zlatan's face is quite dark, and I just wanted to brighten it up. So when you turn it on like that, it looks quite obvious, but in a situation like this, it's not that obvious that it's been done. But if I turn it off again, you'll see it was quite dark, and it's just lifting his face. The nice thing about that is, if I go into edit, it has a built-in keying tool. So you can see here by selecting regions of his face, and you can tweak the colors and what area is being sampled. And this shows you the range of color that I'm sampling. And then you can control the softness. So basically I've got it to a point where it's affecting his face, which is the important thing. You can see it's also affecting on the left a bit, which doesn't really bother me because it's not that important. The key here was his face. This will basically mean that this instance of Colorista is only going to work in this keyed section, which you can see I've got applied here. You can also turn on skin overlay to see the area of skin. But it's a very powerful way of just fixing a little problem or brightening up a skin tone. And sort of following on from Nick's last question, that's the sort of thing that I would always try and fix up shots and little problems in shots as I do it. And it just sort of depends how you're going with the edit. If you're working with someone and you've got a big job to do and you're worried about time, I'd quite often just cut it and come back and fix those sort of things when I've got time. Another trick I like to do is multiple instances. And this is a good example. This shot here of an MLS stadium in Orlando. You can see here I've basically got two different coloristas. And if I turn off one, you can see this colorista here I've basically done just to treat the stadium. And it's got a mask on it, which you see here. It's just a mask which I could track over time and move the points around. But basically what I've done is brightened up the stadium. If I turn that off to show you, so that's the original camera shot. You can see it's quite dark and flat. So I've done that to just sort of brighten up the bottom, and then I've applied another colorista where I've sort of made it go a little purple and pulled the sky out. And in this case, you'll notice this is an inverted matte, or inverted mask rather. Because rather than do the same mask, I've just copied the mask from the stadium, applied it to this one and inverted it. So I have one colorista basically doing the sky, another colorista doing the bottom. And it allows you to sort of get a better, it's almost like an HDR shot. It allows you to treat different parts of the shot separately.
Nice. That's an interesting comment that you were saying about grading as you're going along and fixing things, because it's definitely a different workflow these days than doing, say, an A/B edit or an offline edit as we used to, and then sending it to be graded, because we're kind of having to blur the edges of those different disciplines.
Yeah, well, I think
quick
especially
question from. Sorry, go on, Jason, and I'll follow up with a question.
No, I was just going to say, especially in sport, you tend not to, like, you're editing something that's quite often on air that afternoon, so there's no time to send it off for the different stages from traditional television.
That's true, absolutely. In the 2 minutes you have before transmission. Tova had a question about keyframes when you're in Colorista here, and for example, lighting the face in the last example. Could you tone down the exposure as the subject gets closer to the camera?
Yes, you can. So pretty much every control is keyframeable within Colorista, so you could play with that as much as you like. So even exposure here, you can see, well, like we're saying, if we put keyframe on there, bring that down to 0.5 at that point, so it's less obvious. Come back here and we can make it 2. So obviously that's quite extreme. Obviously you saw everything jump, but when it's playing, it would be more subtle. But yeah, so that's no problem. You can keyframe every attribute pretty much.
I think that's the advantage of the way of using Colorista with looks, as you were saying before, using looks for the overall treatment and then diving into Colorista to do the small little tweaks and adjusting for the light changes as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's Colorista has got quite a lot of powerful things. Obviously, we're getting close to the time, so I can't go over too many things, but one quick thing that I really like is the color feature here, where you can remove colors. So you can see in this case, I've targeted the red in this shot. If we come back up here and I'll turn this one on. So basically I've targeted the red and got rid of everything else. So you can see it's just red with a little bit of the red spilling in there. And that's just using that color section where I pulled down all the colors. You can turn on and off the numbers, which I like to do. You can pull the dots. Mac's struggling. You can just pull the dots around, but by pressing this, it turns on the numbers, and then you can just grab numbers and have quite quick control. But that's a classic look of highlighting a particular color. But likewise, I can also, instead of highlighting a color, you can also just change the color. So in this example, you can see I've just actually made the red look skin tone. If you wanted a skin colored car for some odd reason. And again, that could be keyframed. So you could actually subtly change the car from skin colored to red throughout the video and see how many people notice the color of the car changing.
That's a good point. If you've got warm lighting as well, let's say somebody was passed in front of a warm light and then it just like changed their skin tone significantly, you could use that same technique with the HSL pins just to offset that slightly.
Yeah, definitely.
Done that a bunch of times. Yeah. That's very cool. I think, Nick, did you have a quick little thing that you wanted to just close up with?
Yeah, I can show a couple things.
Yeah, because we're
Sure.
you know, we never overrun on these things, except that we slightly might do occasionally. If you can bear with us for a minute or so, then that might be quite an interesting thing to tie up. And then also, you could share that affiliate code that you promised us at the beginning.
I will. Yes, I will. I'll try to do that. And for this next tip, I actually kind of wanted to build on a topic that was talked about a bit earlier, which was lookup table or looks. I find myself personally using them in when I'm shooting on my own. So one level of that, just to add to Jason, if I have like a client's project, I never lose lookup tables or looks. I own a EVA1 Panasonic camera where I'll shoot in a vlog format, and that's where I'll use a utility-based LUT or lookup table for my specific projects to give myself like a base grade. The lookup table or LUT that I use is very good for the flat look that's produced by the vlog format. There's one other format time that I use LUT or lookup tables, and this is outside of the Magic Bullet Looks tools and specific to Premiere. But I think that one thing about color correction is kind of deciding the tools that work really well inside an application and then figuring out the tools like inside another that are going to suit you in a different workflow. So my thing that I just love that's in Adobe specific is its integration with, which is why I have my phone up, web-based software, and also goes over the topic of looks. There's this free application if you have an Adobe subscription. It's called Adobe Capture. And in Adobe Capture is something called looks. On a lot of branding activation videos that I've done, I needed to kind of develop a color style. And when I used to go into clients' offices, what I would do is take a picture of the office based on the colors that was inside. So in this case, I'm just going to kind of take a picture of this Blackmagic device to show this to you, because I think this is kind of awesome the way this works in Premiere. And what I'm staring at right now is just a test image where it's already applied this look to it. So it's like, this is more for inspiration than anything else. If I tap on the phone, it's not quite happening right now, but if I tap on the phone, usually it will reveal the original look. And there's a slider at the bottom that also allows me to dial up and down the intensity of the look. Now, while this is useful in its own way, this also syncs up with Premiere. So I'm pressing the save button, and I want you to notice that I'm saving this to a library. And libraries are Adobe's terminology that this can be shared in their spree of applications. For looks, this is specific with Premiere Pro. I'm actually going to save this to that library. And I wanted to show, if I minimize now my screen record and bring up libraries in Premiere Pro, that look that I just created, that look one, is a Lumetri color effect. So if I go to the color workspace and you go under creative, you can dial up and down the intensity of that look, applying it to a clip. So I just think that that's kind of awesome. I love to find inspiration from other places. So I use that quite a bit in certain workflows, at least as a reference. In this particular case here on my
Very
timeline, bringing back up like Magic Bullet Looks is integrating it with Adobe's new workflow on the latest release. And there have been times where I've received projects. These are specifically videos that were meant for social media. And while we shot a certain amount of footage, we received like an archive tape from the client but the footage was baked. So we had to then take that baked footage, cut it up, and apply color corrections to it with the new footage integrated with it. Well, so now in Premiere Pro, you can take a master clip or like a baked piece of footage, and in the latest release, perform this thing which is called scene detection. I'm not sure if this might not be, here we go, scene edit detection. What this will do is cut up all of your clips here in the timeline based on cut points, and it's using Adobe Sensei or AI to do this, and it's pretty awesome. So we'll make a cut point at each detected cut, and then also create a bin of subclips from each of those detected cut points. So
it's not creating new media, it's just doing it in subclips, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's creating subclips, and there's still the master clips, and in the timeline, Simon, it's as you can see, this is the end result, and it has done a pretty great job. Through my experience, sometimes dissolves, if there are dissolves baked into the footage, it doesn't always do well with that, but if they are hard cuts, great.
How long does it take typically to do this? Because I tried this in Resolve in the past, and it's great, fantastic to see this inside Premiere. But depending on how long you've got, does it take a particularly long time to process?
I think this was about a 30-minute clip, and if my memory served me correct, it was about 7 minutes to perform the operation. I haven't tried it with smaller clips manually. Yeah, it was about 7 minutes. So with that said, though, if you were to manually go through and cut like 1,000 edits, not a bad thing to wait for. And let's just say that I were to take this clip now and splice in the new content, right? So I would make some insert edits between each of these shots. And then my goal was to then, let's say, perform a color match. One thing you could do with Red Giant tools that I think a lot of people don't is if I go to the Effects tab and grab from my Magic Bullet category here, yeah, there we go, RG Magic Bullet, I can take this effect and actually add it in effect controls, not to an instance of the clip, but to a master clip. And what this does is, if you take a look at my timeline, is it's applied looks to every single version of these cut up clips. So if I had other clips interspersed in here, I could come with this master clip effect and on the master tab level, edit this look, and I'll apply a blockbuster look for now.
Always the one to go for.
Yeah, that's the one. All of these clips are connected to that master clip. And if there are other clips that were interspersed between them, an adjustment layer wouldn't necessarily be the solution, right? Because the adjustment layer, you'd have to have multiple versions of it. So a master clip is great because an individual version of a clip, you're going to have to do copy and pasting of parameters, which wouldn't necessarily be a fluent workflow. So adding looks as a master clip and then going to, let's say, something like color play, because my client said enough blockbuster already. Here you can see that it has applied that new look to each of these clips simultaneously.
That's really interesting. That I can see that if you're sitting with a producer, for example, and just running through a couple of different things, then this method allows you to be able to see the color on multiple shots instantly without having to then do too much clicking or going outside one particular shot as well. So you can look at a range of them. So that's really good for doing iterations on color treatment.
Very no copying and pasting parameters. And there's a way to do this in Resolve too, through nodes in a similar way, where you can add looks at a pre-clip level, and it would apply it to everything that you've grouped to those clips. So anyways, I find this to be like a pretty sweet workflow.
Very interesting. We better wrap up just because we're a few minutes over. on this one. But is this link something you can share, Nick?
Yes. So the link I shared with you earlier is the correct one, Simon. The that goes to the
I had it
page
all
there.
this time.
You've had it all this time, but I found out. Yeah, I was like looking at the card that I have it at. Yeah, and if you go to that bit.ly link, LinkedIn Learning _ Nick Harauz, you guys can all start a 30-day free trial and learn a bit more about Universe. But like with that said, Jason and I have some tips on Universe shortly as well through this free webinar series.
This is true. This is true. We've got a whole bunch of stuff over the next few weeks looking into that. So I've just posted that link in the chat window, and we'll put that link into the automated email as well. And can I put that on the recording inside the YouTube channel, Nick, in the description?
You may. Yes, you can, of course.
I didn't ask you that before. Phew, thank you for saying yes. Excellent. So, okay, quick question from Gilberto. How do you create them? Oh, it was from Joel, rather. Sorry. How did you create that master effect, Nick? How did you access where the masters were?
So one way to do that, am my screen still sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
So if we, here's a clip here on the timeline. One way to do that is with a shortcut, which is you can press F to load a clip into the source monitor, and that would also reveal its effect controls. And then in effect controls, usually you're presented with the clip's effects, right? So this is like the individual instance of the clip. But behind this in effect controls is the master tab. If you're also one who
hop between them, yeah.
And if you mix corrections between Lumetri color as well as looks, this is also built into the Lumetri color panel. So here's your clip instance. Here's the master clip instance. So if I decided to, add a base correction here at the end, say a vignette, that's now applying it as a master across all these clips.
Excellent. A small detail, I've always found it useful that the badges on the timeline also give you an indication. So they give you that little red line. They still do the red line, don't they, Nick? If you've applied a master effect,
yep,
on that badge on the timeline, you can see it. Yeah, this is a great way to freak out your editor friends if they don't know about this. Just add a master clip effect, and then they go to the effects controls panel and think, hang on, why is this being affected? No, don't do that.
Yeah, and they also added this global mute effects badge, which is great for correction too. I don't know what version they did, but you can add it to the program monitor if it's not, and that just turns on and off all the corrections that are in your timeline.
I always put Alt-G onto that shortcut. I think that came in CC 2017.
Okay.
And I always forget to switch it back on.
So not that recent.
That's
I thought it was.
the dangerous thing about that one. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Cool, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for sticking with us. Sorry we overran again. And as we said on last time, a trainer never overruns. They only finish exactly when they mean to. So but okay, we might have slightly overrun, but anyway. Thank you for joining us again. We'll send you all those links in the usual way. And please feel free to reach out to us. I'm Simon at redgiant.com. If you've got any questions or requests for the next few sessions, we'll put all that affiliate link, so that 30-day free for all of Nick's training on the website as well. Or it's not on the website, on the email that you get automatically. And then you'll get the link to the recording in about an hour. Fantastic. So thanks again. And next week, we'll be looking much more at, what are we doing next week? Hang on, let me remind myself. Transitions, there we go. So all sorts of transition fun and saving time to be able to do these fancy things without making it look fancy without spending too much time on it, I believe. That's always the trick. Fantastic. Thank you again. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge generously. And thanks, everyone, for spending the time with us. We'll see you on the next one of these.
See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers then. All right, bye.